Our speaker today is Roger Jackson. He was born in 1955 in Kansas, the son of an itinerant preacher, and they moved around the South. They lived in Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Tennessee, Missouri, Colorado, and Kansas. He was the youngest of 5 children, and at the age of 14, he became an atheist. At the age of 15, he left home, something that he wanted to do and needed to do, and he went to college. His parents were totally indifferent to education. They did not support his plans to go to college, but he didn't listen to them. He listened to his own voice, and he then went back to college when he was 40 years old, and he got a degree in English. He worked for a time as a news reporter with a plan to go to law school, which he didn't do, but he did just about everything else you could imagine. So he married his present wife, Carrie, 8 years ago, and they live in West Virginia in a very rural area on 140 acres of land where he loves to cook, and he has a cob-made outdoor wood-burning oven. He can tell you what the cob is. It's some ancient building material, where he bakes bread nearly every day, and he has a campground. Among the many, many jobs that he has had, for some time he designed games for religious education. Don't you think that's an interesting career choice for an atheist? Some of you might want to get into that profession. Let's see, what else do I have here? But most of the time, Carrie and Roscoe are on the road doing performances. And the performance that he's going to do for us today is a new performance. It's based on a compilation of lectures by Robert Ingersoll, who was a very famous free thinker of the 19th century.
Good morning. Give it up for Sister Mary Lee. It's going to take me just a second to get wired up here. I'm no Luddite just because I dress like one, you know. Okay, I think I'm just about ready to go. And bear with me for just a moment. You may notice, anybody who has Googled Sam Singleton, Atheist Evangelist, has seen this, well, I really hate to say it, but incredibly handsome, dark-haired man with blue spectacles. And you'll notice I don't have dark hair today. I'm going to let you in on a secret. Don't tell anybody. Brother Sam colors his hair. Can you believe that? And somewhere on the road, Brother Sam got separated from said hair color. So if you come to the Wednesday night show and you see an entirely different looking guy, Brother Sam will have found hair color, and we'll hope it turns out like that. But I think gray hair is beautiful. There was a time when America's most famous, most celebrated public speaker was an atheist and a liberal Republican. Though today, to be celebrated and an atheist liberal and a Republican is incongruous past the point of plausibility. Those conditions existed comfortably in the person of Robert Green Ingersoll. He was the son of Reverend John Ingersoll, a Presbyterian pastor whose wife Mary died before the child's second birthday. In the year of Bob's birth, 1833, Great Britain abolished slavery in its colonies. Andrew Jackson, the first of 8 Presbyterian presidents of the United States, began his second term. The city of Chicago was founded. The Reverend quickly remarried and relocated his family to the town of Dresden in the Finger Lakes region of New York. The first of a string of moves that would eventually deposit them on the plains of Illinois. No congregation would make John Ingersoll their permanent pastor, probably owing to his passionate abolitionism, which plenty of Presbyterians found off-putting. Young Bob embraced his father's aversion to slavery, but rejected its theological rationale. Reverend John, though remembered as a kindly man and doting father, seems too often to have allowed sanctimony to override paternal love and harsh discipline to supplant tender guidance. Presbyterianism became Robert Ingersoll's lifelong nemesis, representing everything he detested about religion. Bob never completed grammar school. He was one of those rare autodidacts who, having acquired the ability to read, self-directs a course of study far beyond the scope of any university. He studied law under a small-town pleader, preparatory to a lucrative legal career, which early on was interrupted by the Civil War. He enlisted, raced a troop of Illinois volunteers, went to Tennessee, and was taken captive by the cavalry of Nathan Bedford Forrest, the very same goon who helped found the Ku Klux Klan. The rebels paroled him after 4 days to resume his life as a prairie lawyer. Thereafter, he was Colonel Bob. He was appointed to the office of Illinois Attorney General in 1867. His aspiration of running for governor the following year was frustrated by his outspoken rejection of religion. Had he simply kept his honest opinions to himself, there's no telling how far he might have gone. Hell, today we might be talking about President Ingersoll. Imagine a politician who places honesty and integrity above ambition. It's downright un-American. He was unabashedly patriotic, which for him meant telling the truth, praising his nation's virtues and calling bullshit on its hypocrisy, which he did at length, though not in those exact words, but in the florid speech of the Gilded Age. Candidates to paying audiences. Candidates for office were happy to have him speak on their behalf, but were loath to be too closely associated with his impiety. You know, in the decades following his death, the Republicans and Democrats swapped inviolate values so that those of the one became those of the other. Crazy. But this is the USA. Colonel Bob recognized no distinction between the terms agnostic and atheist. He said, and I quote, "The agnostic is an atheist. The atheist is an agnostic." Still, he was popularly known as the Great Agnostic, which is also the title of Susan Jacoby's Ingersoll biography.
I prefer to be referred to as an atheist. When the theists I know talk about God, they're talking about a specific character, albeit a fictional one, possessed of well-known and specific attributes. That God simply cannot exist. It is self-refuting. I'm an atheist with respect to that God, the God of Abraham, Jehovah, Yahweh. As to some ill-defined cosmic intelligence, I cannot allow or disallow its possibility unless it can be explained in concrete terms. Nor would I regard so nebulous a fancy worthy of much discussion, let alone debate. I'm also partial to free thinker, an honorable ascription. Humanist is good. Anybody who is not a humanist bears watching. Skeptic is fine, too imprecise to convey much meaning, as its value depends entirely on its subject. Secularist is fine too, but you can be a secularist and a theist, which leaves me out. Colonel Bob frequently used the word soul in reference to personhood, in the sense of each person being a soul rather than each person having a soul. I'm fine with that, though the very sound of the word causes my hackles to rise. He said, I dislike a certain set of principles called democracy. Now talk about blasphemy. God damn. Winston Churchill said, the best argument against democracy is a 5-minute conversation with the average voter. Colonel Bob seemed to be referring to the ideology of the big D Democratic Party of the time, not to the little d system of government. Here's another direct quote. I do not believe in forgiveness. Raise your hand if you agree with that statement. Well, you didn't see my hand go up. You know why? Because I am such a guy as takes a lot of forgiving. And I'm not the only one. Being a humanist, I esteem kindness, conciliation, and yes, forgiveness, as the highest of secular virtues. And Colonel Bob goes on to explain that what he does not believe in is for those who have wronged somebody to be able to, just by asking God's forgiveness, to consider themselves absolved of responsibility. He picks on the Presbyterians past all endurance in endlessly derogating their 5 points and creed. He starts to sound as though he's in therapy, and he ought to be paying you to listen to him. In all fairness, to Ingersoll, the Presbyterians represented something of an archetype, much as Pentecostals do to Brother Sam. You play the cards you're dealt. Colonel Bob did all right, notwithstanding, with railroads and robber barons and crooked politicians as clients. He was able to represent the needy pro bono. His legal practice flourished, and he moved his wife and 2 daughters to Washington, D.C., where his elder brother and closest friend Clark had a law office, which they thereafter operated jointly until Colonel Bob moved to New York City, where he lived until his death at the age of 65. In his most famous case as a defense lawyer, he represented a man named C.B. Reynolds for having violated New Jersey's blasphemy law. Reynolds was not only convicted, but was goddamn lucky they didn't publicly stone him to death after Lawyer Bob turned the trial into an exhibition of how to alienate a jury by focusing attention on the counsel for the defense and his low opinion of their religious beliefs. The transcript is available online. Read it if you dare. While still a young man in Illinois, Colonel Bob addressed the state Republican convention and caused a sensation with the brilliance of his oratory. Not long thereafter, his speech at the party's national convention propelled him to preeminence among the orators of what would become a golden age of oratory. He went on the road, and for more than 30 years, invitations to give speeches came in from all quarters. Colonel Bob was a star. Audiences numbering in the thousands, most of them Christians, paid good money to hear him challenge their most cherished beliefs. I know of no public atheist of whom that can be said today. Certainly not me. Mark Twain said that Colonel Bob's toast to the volunteers at a Chicago banquet honoring Ulysses S. Grant on his 57th birthday was the best speech he ever heard. Twain offered up his own immortal toast to the babies at that same event. You can listen to both speeches at samsingleton.com. Twain and Ingersoll became close friends. Thomas Edison was a fan, and among the earliest recordings in human history is Colonel Bob speaking on one of Edison's wax cylinders. Colonel Bob delivered the graveside eulogy at his pal Walt Whitman's funeral. He devoted a lot of time and energy rehabilitating the public memory of Thomas Paine, who had died ignominiously in 1809, the year of Abraham Lincoln's birth. It could be said of Paine, perhaps more than any other man, that without him there simply would not be a USA. Paine's ideas regarding human rights far outshone those of Washington, Adams, Jefferson, Madison, Jay, and even Franklin. But before the end of the 19th century, Theodore Roosevelt would deride Paine as a filthy little atheist, which was not true. Whatever the state of Thomas Paine's personal hygiene, he was no atheist, but a deist, like so many thinkers of that enlightened era. He believed that the universe was created by a deity who thereafter refused to have any more to do with it. Paine had the temerity to question Christian orthodoxy in his Age of Reason, written while in a French prison under sentence of death for opposing capital punishment, even when applied to a despot. I join many others in attempting to render unto Robert G. Ingersoll the service he rendered unto Thomas Paine. Of course, lots of people despised Colonel Bob. Most leading preachers of the day denounced him from the pulpit and in the papers. Still, his fame and popularity increased right up to the day he died in 1899, at peace, surrounded by those who loved him, never having been touched by scandal, never having betrayed his principles for personal gain. He appears to have been a thoroughly decent human being, a loving husband, our faithful husband, a loving father, generous to friend and stranger alike. So I invite you to imagine that it's 1880. You have come in a carriage, on horseback, in a wagon, on foot, on a train, and you have paid the equivalent of $100. There is no microphone, there's no amplifier, nothing but the force of a man's voice and the quality of his ideas to hold your attention, to stimulate your intellect, and stir your emotions for 2 solid hours. tonight's remarks, or this morning's remarks, will run about a quarter of that. So, ladies and gentlemen, Robert G. Ingersoll. Superstition. In nearly every brain is found some cloud of superstition. What is superstition? To believe in spite of evidence or without evidence. To account for one mystery with another. To disregard the true relation between cause and effect. A woman drops a washcloth with which she is doing dishes, and she says, "Well, that means company." Most people will admit that the dropping of the cloth and the coming, that there is no possible connection between the dropping of the cloth and the coming of visitors. The falling cloth could not have put the visit desire in the minds of people not present. How could the cloth produce the desire to visit that particular person? There's no possible connection between the dropping of the cloth and the anticipated effects. A man catches a glimpse of the new moon over his left shoulder. He says, "This is bad luck." To see the moon over the right or left shoulder, or not to see it, could not by any possibility affect the moon, nor could it change the effect or influence on the moon on any earthly thing. Certainly the left shoulder glance could in no way affect the nature of things. All the facts in nature would remain the same as though the glance had been over the right shoulder. We see no connection between the left shoulder glance and any possible evil effects upon the one who saw the moon in this way. What harm does superstition do? To believe in signs and wonders, in amulets, charms, miracles, in gods and devils, in heavens and hells, it makes the brain an insane ward. The world a madhouse. Reason abdicates and superstition wears her crown. The heart hardens and the brain softens. The energies of man are wasted in a vain effort to secure the protection of the supernatural. Credulity, ceremony, worship, sacrifice, and prayer take the place of honest effort, of investigation, of intellectual work, of observation, of experience. Progress becomes impossible. Superstition is, always has been, and forever will be the enemy of liberty. Superstition created all the gods, all the angels, all the devils and ghosts, all the witches, demons, and goblins, gave us all the augurs, soothsayers, and prophets, filled the heavens with signs and wonders, broke the chain of cause and effect, and wrote the history of man in miracles and lies. Superstition made all the popes, cardinals, bishops, and priests, all the monks and nuns, the begging friars and the filthy saints, all the preachers and exhorters, all the called and set apart. Superstition made men fall upon their knees before beasts and stones, caused them to worship snakes and trees and insane phantoms of the air, beguiled them of their gold and toil, and made them shed their children's blood and give their babes to flames. Superstition built the cathedrals and temples, all the altars, mosques, and churches. Superstition invented and used the instruments of torture, flayed men and women alive, loaded millions with chains, and destroyed hundreds of thousands with flames. Superstition mistook insanity for inspiration, and the ravings of madmen for prophecy, for the wisdom of God. Superstition imprisoned the virtuous, tortured the thoughtful, killed the heroic, put chains on the bodies, manacles on the brain, and utterly destroyed the liberty of speech. Superstition gave us all the prayers and ceremonies, taught all the kneelings, genuflections, and prostrations, taught men to hate themselves, to despise pleasure, to scar their flesh and to grovel in the dust, to desert their wives and children, to shun their fellow men, spend their lives in useless pain and prayer. Superstition taught that faith is superior to fact, that credulity leads to heaven, that doubt is the road to hell, that belief is better than knowledge, and that to ask for evidence is to insult God. Superstition is, always has been, and forever will be the foe of progress, the enemy of education, and the assassin of freedom. It sacrifices the known to the unknown, the present to the future, this actual world to the shadowy next. It has given us a selfish heaven and a hell of infinite revenge. It has filled the world with hatred, with war and crime, with the malice of meekness and the arrogance of humility. Superstition. The believers in the supernatural, in a power superior to nature, in God, have what they call inspired books. These books contain the absolute truth. They must be believed. He who denies them will be punished with eternal pain. These books are not addressed to human reason. They are above reason. They care nothing for what a man calls facts. Facts that do not agree with these books are mistakes. These books are independent of human experience, of human reason. Our inspired books constitute what we call the Bible. And any man who reads this inspired book, looking for contradictions and mistakes and interpolations, imperils the salvation of his soul. While he reads, he has no right to think, no right to reason. His only duty is to believe. Millions of men have wasted their lives in the study of this book, in trying to harmonize contradictions and to explain the obscure and seemingly absurd. In doing this, they have justified nearly every crime and every cruelty. In its follies, they have found the profoundest wisdom. Hundreds of creeds have been constructed from its inspired passages. Probably no two of its readers have ever agreed as to its meaning. Thousands have studied Hebrew and Greek that they might read the Old and New Testaments in the languages in which they were written. The more they studied, the more they differed. Is it necessary to understand Hebrew in order to know that cruelty is not a virtue? That murder is inconsistent with infinite goodness, and that eternal punishment could be inflicted upon man only by an eternal fiend? Is it essential to conjugate the Greek verbs before you could make up your mind as to the probability of dead people getting out of their graves. Must one be versed in Latin before he is entitled to express his opinion as to the genuineness of a pretended revelation from God? Common sense belongs exclusively to no tongue. Logic is not confined to, nor has it been buried with, the dead languages. The Christians say that their God has existed from eternity, that He is and forever has been and forever will be infinite, wise, and good. Could this God have avoided being God? Could He have avoided being good? Was He wise and good without His wish or will? Being from eternity, He was not produced. He was back of all cause. What He is, He was, and will be unchanged, unchangeable. He had nothing to do with the making or developing of His character. Nothing to do with the development of His mind. He has made no progress. He's never learned anything. Never practiced any self-denial. Was never tempted, never touched by fear or hope, and has never had a want. Why then, I ask, should we praise Him? Why should we pray to Him? He cannot change. And yet Christians implore their God not to do wrong. The meanest thing charged against the devil is that he leads the children of men into temptation. And yet, in the Lord's Prayer, God is insultingly asked not to imitate the king of fiends. Lead us not into temptation. We know that superstition has given us delusions and illusions, dreams and visions, ceremonies and cruelties, faith and fanaticism, beggars and bigots, persecutions and prayers, theology and torture, piety and poverty, saints and slaves, miracles and mummeries, disease and death. Science is the real redeemer. It put faithful doubt above thoughtless faith. Prejudice, egotism, contempt, disdain are the enemies of truth and progress. We believe in the natural. We have faith in facts, in knowledge, in the development of the brain. We throw away superstition and welcome science. We banish the phantoms, the mistakes, and the lies, and cling to the truth. We do not enthrone the unknown and crown our ignorance. We do not stand with our backs to the sun and mistake our shadow for God. We do not create a master and thankfully wear his chains. We do not enslave ourselves. We want no leaders, no followers. Our desire is that every human being shall be true to himself, to his ideal, unbribed by promises, careless of threats. We want no tyrant on the earth or in the air. The government of the United States is secular. It derives its power from the consent of man. It is a government with which God has nothing whatever to do. And all forms and customs inconsistent with the fundamental fact that the people are the source of authority should be abandoned. In this country, there should be no oaths. No man should be sworn to tell the truth. And in no court should there be any appeal to any supreme being. A witness should tell his story, and if he speaks falsely, should be considered as guilty of perjury. Governors and presidents should make no religious proclamations. They should not call upon the people to thank God. It is no part of their official duty. It is outside of and beyond the horizon of their authority. There's nothing in the Constitution of the United States to justify this religious impertinence. A nation can neither be Christian nor infidel. A nation is incapable of having opinions upon these subjects. If a nation is Christian, will all the citizens go to heaven? If it is not, will they all be damned? Of course, it is admitted that a nation, or that the majority of citizens comprising a nation may believe or disbelieve, and they can call their nation whatever they please. A nation is a corporation. To repeat a familiar saying, it has no soul. There can be no such thing as a Christian corporation. Several Christians may form a corporation. Several Christians may form a corporation, but it can hardly be said that the corporation thus formed was included in the atonement. For instance, 7 Christians form a corporation. That is to say, there are 7 natural persons and 1 artificial. Can it be said that there are 8 souls to save? It is contended by many that ours is a Christian government, founded upon the Bible, and that those who look upon the book as false or foolish are destroying the foundation of our country. The truth is, our government is not founded upon the rights of gods, but upon the rights of men. Our Constitution was framed not to declare and uphold the deity of Christ, but the sacredness of humanity. Ours is the first government made by the people and for the people. It's the only nation with which the gods have had nothing to do. Yet there are some judges, dishonest and cowardly enough to solemnly decide that this is a Christian country and that our free institutions are based upon the infamous laws of Jehovah. Our civilization is not Christian. It does not come from the skies. It's not the result of inspiration. It is the child of invention, of discovery, of applied knowledge. That is to say, of science. When man becomes great and grand enough to admit that all have equal rights, when thought is untrammeled, when worship shall consist in doing useful things, when religion means the discharge of obligations to our fellow men, then and not until then will the world be civilized. Churches are becoming political organizations. Probably will not be long before the churches will divide as sharply as upon political as upon theological questions. When that day comes, if there are not liberals enough to hold the balance of power, this government will be destroyed. The liberty of man is not safe in the hands of any church. Wherever the Bible and sword are in partnership, man is a slave. Belief is, and forever must be, the result of evidence. A promised reward is not evidence. It sheds no intellectual light. It establishes no fact. It answers no objection. It dissipates no doubt. Is it honest to offer a reward for belief? A man who gives money to a judge or a juror for a decision or verdict is guilty of a crime. Why? Because he induces the judge, the juror, to decide not according to the law, to the facts, the right, but according to the bribe. The bribe is not evidence. So, the promise of Christ to reward those who will believe is a bribe. It is an attempt to make a promise take the place of evidence. He who says he believes and does it for the reward corrupts his soul. Suppose I should say at the center of the earth is a diamond 100 miles in diameter, and that I would give $10,000 to any man who would believe my statement. Could such a promise be regarded as evidence? Intelligent people would ask not for rewards, but reasons. Only hypocrites would take the money. Yet according to the New Testament, Christ offered a reward to those who would believe, and this promised reward was to take the place of evidence. The declaration that salvation is a reward for belief is inconsistent with mental freedom and could have been made by no man who thought that evidence sustained the slightest relation to belief. Every sermon in which men have been told that they should save their souls only by believing has been an injury. Such sermons dull the moral sense and subvert the true conception of virtue and duty. The true man, when asked to believe, asks for evidence. The true man who asks another to believe offers evidence. And Christians say to me, suppose all this should turn out to be true, and you should come to the day of judgment and find all these things to be true. What would you do then? Well, I would walk up like a man and say, I was mistaken. And suppose God was about to pass judgment on you, what would you say? I would say unto him, do unto others as you would that others should do unto you. Why not? What man who really believes that blood can appease God? And yet our entire system of religion is based upon that belief. The Jews pacified Jehovah with the blood of animals. And according to the Christian system, the blood of Jesus softened the heart of God a little and rendered possible the salvation of a few. It's hard to conceive how the human mind can give assent to such terrible ideas, or how any sane man can read the Bible and still believe in the doctrine of inspiration. Christianity has such a contemptible opinion of human nature that it does not believe a man can tell the truth unless frightened by a belief in God. No lower opinion of the human race has ever been expressed. I would not for the life of me destroy one star of human hope. But I want it so that when a poor woman rocks the cradle and sings a lullaby to the dimpled darling, she will not be compelled to believe that 99 chances in 100 she is raising kindling wood for hell. If there is a God who will damn his children forever, I would rather go to hell than to go to heaven and keep the society of such an infamous tyrant. If there is a God who will damn his children forever, I would rather go to hell than to go to heaven and keep the society of such an infamous tyrant. I make my choice now. I despise that doctrine. It has covered the world with, it has covered the cheeks of this world with tears. It has polluted the hearts of children and poisoned the imaginations of men. What right have you, sir, Mr. Clergyman, you, minister of the gospel, to stand at the portals of the tomb into the vestibule of eternity and fill the future with horror and fear? I do not believe this doctrine, and neither do you. If you did, you could not sleep one moment. Any man who believes it and has within his breast a decent, throbbing heart will go insane. A man who believes that doctrine and does not go insane has the heart of a snake and the conscience of a hyena. The clergy know that I know that they do not know. The great volume of nature should be open to all. None but the intelligent and honest can really read this book. Prejudice clouds and darkens every page. Hypocrisy reads and misquotes, and credulity accepts the quotation. Superstition cannot read a line or spell the shortest word. And yet this volume holds all knowledge, all truth, and is the only source of thought. Mental liberty means the right of all to read this book. Here the Pope and the peasant are equal. Each must read for himself, and each ought honestly and fearlessly to give to his fellow men what he learns. Intelligence is the only light. It enables us to keep the highway, to avoid obstructions, and to take advantage of the forces of nature. It is the only lever capable of raising mankind. To develop the brain is to civilize the world. Intelligence reaves the heaven of winged and frightful monsters. It drives ghosts and leering fiends from the darkness and floods with light the dungeons of fear. All should be taught that there is no evidence of the existence of the supernatural. That the man who bows before an altar an idol of wood or stone is just as foolish as the one who prays to an imagined God. That all worship has for its foundation the same mistake, the same ignorance, the same fear. That it is just as foolish to believe in a personal God as in a personal devil. Just as foolish to believe in great ghosts as in little ones. So all should be taught that the forces, the facts in nature cannot be controlled or changed by prayer or praise, by supplication, ceremony, or sacrifice. That there is no magic, no miracle, and that the whole world is natural. The founder of a religion must be able to turn water into wine, cure with the word, cure the blind and lame with a simple touch, bring the dead to life. It was necessary for him to demonstrate to the satisfaction of the barbarian disciple that he was superior to nature. In times of ignorance, this was easy to do. Consequently, every religion has for its foundation a miracle. That is to say, a violation of nature. That is to say, a falsehood. No one in the whole world's history ever attempted to substantiate a truth by a miracle. The truth scorns the assistance of a miracle. Nothing but falsehood ever attested itself by signs and wonders. No miracle was ever performed, and no sane man ever thought that he had performed one. And until one is performed, there can be no evidence of the existence of any power superior to and independent of nature. Nature. This century will be called Darwin's century. He was one of the greatest men who ever touched this globe. He's explained more of the phenomena of life than all the religious teachers. Write the name of Darwin on the one hand, and on the other, the name of every theologian who has ever lived, and more light came to the world from that one name than from all of those. His doctrine of evolution, his doctrine of the origin of species, has removed to the thinking mind the last vestige of Orthodox Christianity. He has not only stated, but he has demonstrated that the inspired writer knew nothing of this world, nothing of the origin of man, nothing of geology, nothing of astronomy, nothing of nature. That the Bible is a book written by ignorance at the instigation of fear. Think of the men who have replied to him. Only a few years ago, there was no person too ignorant to successfully answer Charles Darwin. And the more ignorant he was, the more cheerfully he took on the job. Charles Darwin was held up to the ridicule, the scorn and contempt of the Christian world. Yet when he died, England was proud to put his dust with that of her noblest and her grandest. Charles Darwin conquered the intellectual world, and his doctrines are now accepted facts. The notion that faith in Christ is to be rewarded by an eternity of bliss, while a dependence upon reason, observation, and experience merits everlasting pain, is too absurd for refutation and can be relieved only by that unhappy mixture of insanity and ignorance called faith. Faith in Christ. Christ never wrote a solitary word of the New Testament. Not one word. There is an account that he once stooped and wrote something in the sand, but that has not been preserved. He never told anybody to write a word. He never said, Matthew, remember this. Mark, do not forget to put that down. Luke, be sure in your gospel you have this. John, do not forget it. Not one word. And it has always seemed strange to me that a being coming from another planet with a message of infinite importance to mankind should at least have verified that message by his own signature. Is it not strange that he gave no orders to have his words preserved, words upon which hung the salvation of a world? In the old times, when church got a little scarce for money, they always put in a passage praising poverty. So they had this young man ask, "What lack I yet?" And Jesus said unto him, "If thou wilt be perfect, go and sell that thou hast, and give it to the poor, and thou shalt have treasures in heaven." The church has always been willing to swap off treasures in heaven for cash down. And when the next verse was written, the church must have been nearly dead broke. "And again I say unto you, it is easier for a camel to pass through the eye of the needle than for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of God." Did you ever know a wealthy disciple to unload on account of that verse? And then comes, "And everyone that has forsaken houses or brothers or sisters or fathers or mother or wife and children or lands for my name's sake shall receive 100-fold and shall inherit everlasting life." And we turn the page and he says, "If you will desert your father and mother, you shall have everlasting life." I will never desert the one I love for the promise of any God. It is far more important that we shall love our wives than that we shall love God. And I will tell you why. You cannot help him. You can help her. You can fill her life with the perfume of perpetual joy. It is far more important that you love your children than that you love Jesus Christ. And why? If he is God, you can't help him, but you can plant a little flower of happiness in every footstep of that child from the cradle until you die in that child's arms. Let me tell you today, it is far more important to build a home than to erect a church. The holiest temple beneath the stars is a home that love has built. Heaven is where are those we love and those who love us. And I wish to go to no world unless I can be accompanied by the ones who love me here. Talk about the consolations of this infamous doctrine. The consolations of a doctrine that makes a father say, "I can be happy with my daughter in hell." That makes a mother say, "I can be happy with my generous, brave boy in hell." That makes a boy say, "I can enjoy the glories of heaven with the woman who bore me, who would have died for me in eternal agony." And they call that tidings of great joy. Christianity. At one time, Christianity succeeded in silencing the infidel. And then came the Dark Ages, when all rule was ecclesiastical, when the air was filled with devils and spooks, when birth was a misfortune, life a prolonged misery of fear and torment, and death a horrible nightmare. They crushed the infidels. Galileo, Kepler, Copernicus, wherever a ray of light appeared in the ecclesiastical darkness. But that day has passed. All the churches in the United States cannot even crush me. The day for that is gone, never to return. If they think they can crush free thought in this country, let them try it. On behalf of Colonel Bob and myself, I thank you. Thank you.